Hi guys, welcome back. This is the second and final part of my lecture on the national interests of those actors who participated in World War I. We're not going to look at all of the countries and empires that participated, but we're going to look at a few key players. And the thematic purpose of what we're doing is for you to understand what major players wanted out of World War I so that you understand that when the war is over, and these different combatants, whether they won or whether they lost, the fact that they didn't get what they wanted and walked away so disillusioned with the Great War that that's going to be one of the most major causes of World War II. So that's why we're looking at the causes of World War I once again, but this time from the point of view of certain key players. So let's talk about them. As I'm speaking today, please take notes. You are going to have a unit test. The unit test is going to be more traditional, and I can't imagine that I would be able to stop you from using your notes. So please take good notes to follow along. All right, so the question that's guiding my lecture is, what did each actor expect to gain from the Great War? So far, we've talked about Serbia and the Russian Empire. With Serbia, we talked about the idea that they wanted to expand their borders. They wanted to make a larger country, and they wanted that larger country to include the Slavic nationality. They would eventually achieve this when they created Yugoslavia after World War II. The second actor that we looked at yesterday when I lectured was the Russian Empire. The Russian Empire wanted several things, but probably the most important, at least in this historian's opinion, was they wanted a warm water port. So like the Serbians, they wanted to gain land, but unlike the Serbians, they didn't want to, they didn't have a nationalist mindset. They didn't want to bring other Slavic people into the Russian Empire. They specifically wanted access to either the Mediterranean Sea, the Indian Ocean, or the Atlantic Ocean so that they could easily trade the vast amount of raw resources that the Russian Empire has access to. So in today's lecture, I'm going to talk about the Germans next, then the Italians, then the British, then the Americans, and then I will briefly conclude with a discussion of the Chinese and the Japanese Empire. So have your notebook out, and let's get started. Okay, so what did the Germans hope to get from World War I? Well, let's see if you can figure it out yourself. Take a look at this picture of Iran in 1908. Take a look at this mule. All right, don't look at the mule. Look at what the mule's carrying. So we're all about the second industrial revolution in this class, especially because our primary focus is on the first half of the 20th century and the late 19th century. Now, with the second industrial revolution, you have all these new technologies, and for the Germans, one of the most important is the invention of the automobile. If you've ever wondered why German automobiles are so good today, it's because they basically invented the automobile as you know it. The Mercedes-Benz is actually one of the first cars. Now, they had this incredible invention that borrowed from technology from other people, but they turned it into what you would recognize as an automobile, and they very intelligently, very wisely understood the value of what they had. And sure enough, the economic demand for cars exploded. And when the demand for German automobiles exploded, so did the need for petroleum. But Germany lacked two things. One, oil fields, and number two, a large navy to protect any fleets that might go to where oil fields are. Now, the most massive oil field they knew about in the beginning of the 20th century, when the automobiles really became a huge thing, was in Iran. So you're looking at an oil field in Iran in 1908 where petroleum is being extracted, and then you're looking at a very inefficient, unhappy mule carrying petroleum through the desert. So that's not going to meet German automobile demand. So what the Germans wanted to do just prior to World War I is to build a railway. It came to be known as the Baghdad Railway. Baghdad is the capital of Iraq. So they wanted to build a railway line from the manufacturing centers in Berlin all the way down to the vast oil fields in Iran. Now, look at that map. You can clearly see the railway going from the top left, where Berlin is, all the way down into what's labeled as Mesopotamia. To build a railway that long, you have to go through many states. A lot of those states were unstable. Notice where it says Bulgaria, between Serbia and the Black Sea. So that's the Balkan Peninsula. The Balkan Peninsula, you know also as the Balkan powder keg, is a highly unstable region. The Germans needed to pacify all of this land between their capital Berlin to the oil fields in Iran. So to do that, they were supportive of any measure that brought the lands in between Berlin and the oil fields that stabilized and pacified them so that they could, one, build the railway and then obviously safely operate it to bring petroleum from Iran to Berlin. Now, it's important to say, if you're going to carry something as heavy as petroleum, the ideal way to carry it is by ship. Unfortunately, in order to do that, the Germans would have to compete with the British, and they couldn't. The British Navy was the best in the world at the beginning of the 20th century, but the German army, their cars and their tanks and even their airplanes, were the best in the world. So Germany had the land, and to a limited degree they had the skies, but they couldn't get access to the seas easily without running into conflict with the British, which is where they devised this idea to come up with a railway. So what did Germany want from World War I? They wanted all of the land in between Iran and Germany to be pacified. They didn't want to colonize it, but they wanted to make sure that it was in the hands of friends so that they could build and operate their railway. So when Austria came to Germany and said, hey, we're thinking about expanding our borders south into the Balkan Peninsula, Kaiser Wilhelm II immediately agreed to that because Austrians are basically Germans. The alliance, the friendship between Austria and Germany has been around for a very long time. They were once part of the Holy Roman Empire together. Culturally, they're very similar. They speak the same language. So when the Austrians offered to conquer this land and bring it under the control of Germany's closest friend, they agreed to it. So World War I was given the blessing of Kaiser Wilhelm II with the idea that the Austrians would be able to take the Balkan Peninsula. Okay, next. Oh, I'm sorry, I forgot about this. So here's a picture of the Baghdad Railway. I think perhaps more interesting for you is to know about the story of Lawrence of Arabia. During World War I, to make sure that the German army didn't have access to petroleum for its trucks, its transport vehicles, its destroyers, its trains, even its tanks by the end of the war, the British put together a team of Arab desert raiders and attacked the train. I can't show that clip on here, or I think either YouTube or Yoko will shut me down for copyright infringement, but I am going to link for you to see a scene of these desert raiders led by a very famous British colonel named Lawrence of Arabia attacking the Baghdad Railway during World War I. Okay, let's move on. So what did Italy want? I think you guys will find this quite easy. Again, the answer is land. But let's go back a little bit. Italy, as a culture, has been around for thousands of years at this point. But as a country, it's fairly young. Around 1870, after about 20 years, the different Italian city-states came together and they formed what became the boot of Europe. And you're seeing a map of it right here. So this is the Italy that you know. But this is a fairly young country, born in the 1870s-ish. I don't know the exact date, and I don't expect you to know it either, but I do want you to understand that Italy doesn't become a country until the late 19th century. And while it's a valuable piece of land because it's on the Mediterranean Sea, it's not particularly large. So look at the black land areas surrounding Italy. You'll see one to the north where it says Trentino. You'll see one to the northeast east of Italy along the Adriatic Sea, kind of on the opposite side of the sea as the boot. So all of those lands in black were promised to Italy by Britain in a secret and highly illegal promise during World War I, and the deal was this. The British went to the Italians and they said, if you betray your ally, the Germans and the Austrians, and you come fight on the British and the French side, when the war is over, we will take land from Austria and give it to you, and we'll take land from the new states in the Balkan Peninsula and we'll give it to you. Now, the problem with this deal is that that land did not belong to Britain, so they couldn't possibly make such a promise. But they did, and the Italians accepted the promise, even though, if you think about it in reflection, it's kind of ludicrous. But the Italians were willing to try anything to expand their land possessions. Why? Well, Italy was the beating heart of the Roman Empire, one of the great civilizations of mankind. But with the fall of Rome in the Middle Ages and into the modern era, the Roman Empire disappeared, as you well know. However, the Italians, when they were able to unify their city-states and create the Italian boot, to create the European boot that is Italy, I should say, they started to dream bigger and bigger. So here we go, fancy word time. The word is irredentism. And what irredentism means is it's when a country has dreams of recreating former glory. So you may say, for example, I don't want to talk about China, I might get in trouble. Think about a world leader who wants to expand his land to recreate a former empire that once existed. So you would say that leader has an irredentist dream or has an irredentist motivation. The Italians going into World War I were motivated by irredentism. They wanted to, in the long term, recreate the Roman Empire. And they were going to start with some modest pieces of land, but the idea was afterwards, little by little, they would expand their land holdings and then they would regain former glory during the Roman imperial days. Okay, so what did Britain hope to gain from World War I? This is an easy one. Nothing, really. Britain was the world's superpower at the time. It had the largest empire in human history at the time of World War I. The largest empire in human history. They were winning the game. They had everything that you could possibly want, so they just didn't want anyone to mess it up. They were not overly enthusiastic about World War I, but it was thrust upon them. They also felt threatened by German engineering and German ambitions to build the Baghdad Railway into Iran. So they were wary of Germany expanding its borders too much. I don't want to overcomplicate the story, but you should also know, for historical accuracy terms, they were also very concerned about the Russians. They were worried about the Russian Empire expanding into territory that they controlled in Asia. Anyway, short answer. What did Britain hope to gain from World War I? Nothing really, although checking German military and trading power would be a plus. The United States of America. The United States of America did not want to participate in World War I. We entered the war very late in 1917, at the second half of the second to last year of the war. So World War I ends in 1918. The United States enters World War I in spring of 1917. We were very reluctant combatants in that war. We didn't want anything and we didn't want to get sucked into it. And in 1917, when we did get sucked into the Western Front, America was very clear about what a horror show it was. So what did America want at the time? Let me show you a famous quote from Thomas Jefferson, one of the most famous founding fathers of the United States. Go ahead and read for yourself. America during World War I was a very different country than you know today. We didn't get overly involved in other people's affairs. And this is a debatable point. And next year, when you're with Miss Sternan and you're learning about U.S. history, you can tell me everything that is wrong with the statement that I'm about to make. But let me make it now. At this time, America did not see itself as an empire. We didn't want to get anything out of World War I, but we did want the world to stop fighting so that American business could continue to profit from global trade. The Great War was dampening the world economy, kind of like coronavirus is doing for U.S. business right now. So, what did America want out of World War I? We wanted it to end. We wanted it to end quickly, and we wanted to be able to resume trade. America, this time, is the second player. The British Empire is the richest country on earth, but the American economy and the ability to manufacture is growing at an extremely fast rate, faster than any country, than any other country. We had also learned to make the automobile. Just 10 years prior to the start of World War I, the Wright brothers invented the airplane, which is going to become a huge thing. All these different things that America was able to produce industrial and agriculturally, we were unable to trade with anyone during the Great War because armed conflict was blocking trade routes and nobody had the money to pay for it anyway. So what do we want? A return to normal. Okay, China and Japan. I'm going to lump these two together. I don't want to focus on them too hard, but because we have some Japanese students and because some of you are ethnically Chinese, I want to discuss it. That's not to say that China and Japan aren't important. They both are extremely important, and in a month or so, we're going to look at both in a very focused way. But for now, here's what I want you to understand, and you could probably guess this if we were in the classroom together. What does China want? China thinks that if they can back the winning side on World War I, that the Europeans that have taken chunks of their land from the Opium Wars back in the 1840s, that they will leave China and respect Chinese sovereignty, Chinese independence. And that's what the Chinese do. We don't talk about it too frequently, but it's very important. And I'll tell you how it relates to the story of Mao Zedong on another day. But the Chinese fought on the side of the British. They didn't send any soldiers, but they did send, I think, something like 30,000 or 300,000. And you can fact check my numbers on it. It's either 30,000 or 300,000. Whatever number it is, it's large for the time. But they sent a bunch of Chinese laborers to France. And they sent the Chinese laborers into the French factories so that the French factory workers then could go fight on the Western Front and defend France from German military incursion. So, what did the Chinese want? They wanted sovereignty. They wanted the Europeans out. They wanted to regain those concessions that they had lost in the middle of the 19th century. What did Japan want? Japan wanted what pretty much everyone else wanted: land. Japan, because of the Meiji Reformation that you studied with Mr. McMaster last year, had industrialized to an impressive extent. And over a very short period of time, Japan was ready to become a great power. They had defeated the Chinese. More importantly, in 1905, they defeated the Russian Empire twice in the Russo-Japanese War of 1905. And when they did that, and when they started to bully China, it became clear that Japan was equal to any of the European or American great powers at the time. So they wanted to expand their territorial holdings, and they wanted to be put on an equal footing with their European and American counterparts so that they could control the narrative of history at the time. Okay, that's what everybody wanted. The war is going to end in 1918, and then all of these diplomats that you're looking at right now, including all the diplomats from the countries that you are citizens of today, sent diplomats there to Paris, and they worked out some of the worst surrender treaties imaginable that directly would lead to World War II, which is a story for another day. Bye, guys.